Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing Ankush Jain. Ankush is a coach and author based in London, England, and most importantly, he recently became a proud father to his first child, a baby boy. So, this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to be introducing Ankush Jain. Hi, Ankush.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. So, Ankush, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and, introduce yourself so for people who don't know you already?
Yeah, I guess you could call me a coach, a life coach, a business consultant. Last year I became an author, and very recently I became a dad for the very first time.
Fantastic. How old's your boy now?
So at the time of recording this, he's just around 3 months old, and he's changed so much in such a short time, but I'm sure everyone can relate to that.
Oh yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? How much that change goes. Funnily enough, I was looking this morning. We kept a book, writing down things after a few weeks because we realised that change was happening so much. And my boy's 5 now, and I was just looking back this morning, chuckling at some of the things that we noticed as he evolved. And it's a wondrous thing.
Absolutely.
So perhaps we can start with the business first, because you haven't been a life coach forever, as I know well. Do you want to tell people a little bit about your journey into life coaching?
I got into this 2012, I think, when I first started taking on clients. Before that, I had a corporate job for quite some time, and I was always very passionate about coaching. I was very passionate about personal development. I was very passionate about improving myself, so to speak, and anything that was in that realm of pop psychology or personal development, I was very interested in. And at work, I volunteered to try and go on as much training as I could. And outside of work, I was, really only had one hobby, which was this. And spent quite a lot of money. I think when I was 25 years old, I hired my first coach for a few £1,000s, and I would travel literally all around the world, on my holidays. So I was a bit odd that way. I didn't only do that, but I did use certainly a lot of my holidays for courses and coaching. And certainly the older I got, that happened more and more. And then I never really considered doing it as a profession. It was always my hobby. It was something I did and enjoyed on the side. But in 2012, I had, one of those eureka moments. One day I was cooking, and the flash of insight came to me that, maybe I should do coaching for a living. And it just felt really right. And at the time, I had been thinking about my next career move and what I wanted to do next. And I'd considered all sorts of things, from staying in the profession but moving abroad through to changing professions, but I'd never really considered coaching until it occurred to me in that moment. And then I just set out getting trained, and I did that for a couple of years and took on a few clients here and there. And after a couple of years, it had started to grow, and I decided to quit my full-time job and do this full-time. And that was at the start of 2015 is when I started that. So it's been over 5 years now.
Fantastic. And what sparked your interest in personal development? Do you have a sense of where that searching came from?
I know exactly where it came from. I didn't really think there was much wrong with me per se, but I certainly was fairly insecure and wasn't the most confident person. But I saw I remember at a very young age, I joined this youth group, and I became a leader in this youth group. And I started to develop in confidence confidence and grow, and that happened through my teens. And so I became open to the possibility that people could change. And then when I got to university, the thing that I think most guys are interested in at that age is girls rather than your studies. And I absolutely sucked in that domain. And so one of my friends introduced me to some material to do better with women, which was very manipulative, and didn't really call to me too much. But there were a few nuggets in there that, when I cut through the manipulation and said, "Oh well, that's interesting," and things like just making eye contact. And I mean, it didn't really only apply to women; it applied everywhere, because I used to walk through the world staring at my feet. And for people who know me now, and especially know what I do, that might sound very surprising. But I was very, very shy, very scared, and couldn't face the world. And so when I started making eye contact, initially with women, or making a bit more eye contact, 'cause I was so afraid of doing that, it kind of had an impact elsewhere in my life. And so then I got into more and more personal development. And I remember one of the first things I read was something along the lines of, if you want to have a really great woman in your life, you need to be a great guy. And so this thing that I read pointed me towards kind of personal development, as opposed to manipulation or trying to trick women. And it really started my journey into personal development, into being more than I was being at the time.
So I mean, that's a really interesting story, and obviously knowing more about you now, and we've chatted a few times over the last couple of years. I imagine your view about personal development has evolved, if not changed, quite radically. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because it's very easy to dismiss what I've done before,
Mm,
um, based on what I know now, and certainly my views have changed. But I don't regret anything, and I really value the journey that I've been on. You know, and I think this is a really important point, because I think there seems to be a fashion, certainly with what I see online in certain communities, to disparage what came before that, right?
mm,
So I know there's now quite a few people disparaging the personal development community, um, because they feel that uh, it starts with the premise that you're broken or something's wrong with you, and so you need to develop yourself to be better than what you are. And where I work with people now is the starting point is you're not broken. I mean, that was the whole point of the book that I released and published last year, was we're born perfect and whole. And if you look at very small children, they don't have any issues with creativity or confidence, or um, being in the present moment. A lot of what we look for as adults, they have in spades. And yet, I learned a lot through that journey in my 20s. And um, and I think if I hadn't, y- you know I don't think I could have shortcutted that. I think you can shortcut some of it, for sure. But everything that we go through, we go through, and can be useful to us. And I've gone back recently and looked at things that I had read years ago, or listened to years ago. And yes, my viewpoint is very different now. And whilst I wouldn't, I would share things in a certain way differently now. I still find value in some of the stuff. And this, to be honest, was exactly how I approached it in the first place, Matt. There was a mantra from some coaches who I used to follow back in the day, who were like, take what works and discard the rest. And I've always followed that kind of path, whatever I've come across. And so, like I said, from day one, looking at some stuff with regards to women, there was stuff in there that was, back then, I didn't like and I thought was manipulative. Um, but I was able to look past that and go, right, is there something in here that can help me? Oh, yes, there is. Let me take that. And so, yes, my views change in terms of that whole. The biggest thing was about the piece about being broken, and fixing yourself or improving yourself versus coming back to home or coming back to how we were born. But I wouldn't like to say that there was nothing of value in what I learned before, because that's certainly not the case.
I think it's a really, really great point you're making, and I'd certainly echo that. I went on a long personal development journey through classic therapy and all the rest before I came to the approach that we both share these days. And I don't think I would have got where I don't think I would be where I am today had I not been through that process. I mean, just you alluded to kind of the perfection in a sense of children, and I'm wondering, like, what now that you're a dad and with such a young child, what you've been seeing in your child that has either reflected or deepened your understanding of how we're born into the world.
Well, I mean, he's just a really great teacher for me. He's I mean, I'm sure every dad thinks this, but he's a gorgeous little kid, and it's so amazing to me how he keeps coming back to the present moment. And he can be bawling his eyes out one minute. I have this quite heavy watch that I wear, and I remember once I was feeding him, and where my hand was, I kept smacking the back of his head with this heavy watch, which obviously wasn't very nice for him. And I did it by accident a couple of times. I'm not a monster, and he started bawling, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I carry feed, and he forgot, and he was fine. And then I did it a second time, and I was like, "Oh no, this needs," and I took the watch off, and I thought, God, if he was, an adult or something, or he thought like an adult, he could hold a grudge against me, like, you hit me on the back of the head. I remember last time you did this, right? There'd be a whole story around it. But he doesn't. He's just so completely loving and so present. The past is a past, and he just moves forward. And there've been times where I've been upset or, not thinking clearly, and I'll see him, and he's so present that it just reminds me that, I'm just caught up in my own head in that moment, and it's easy to just drop it. So I'm really cherishing. I mean, like I say, he's only 3 months old at the moment, but I'm really cherishing this time. And I've seen it with my nieces. I think up to about 3-4 years old, they tend to be this way, and then it starts to change. So I'm really, really cherishing these moments with him, because just as much as I'm teaching him, he's certainly teaching me, and he's also an inspiration for me. I'm sure other dads feel this too, that I want to be better, or I want to be the best that I can for him, and be a role model for him, and set, it's very easy, I think, maybe not so much now, but in years gone by, it was do what I say, don't, rather than look at what I do. And that's certainly changing. I think the thing that speaks loudest to anyone, and certainly children, is, how we act. So if I want him to be kind and loving, and I'm not kind and loving, well, he'll pick up on that. And if I want him to be confident and not hold back, then I've got to model that too. So he's certainly an inspiration to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It kind of brings to mind, actually, another question I had for you, Ankush, which was, what kind of imprint did your dad have on you as a father, and how's that influenced you, either for good or bad, as to be the dad you are now?
Yeah, I've had a really interesting relationship with my father. In hindsight, he wasn't a bad dad at all. He was away a lot for business. He ran his own business, and he worked hard to provide for the family. But I wasn't. I don't remember feeling extremely close with my dad. Although, they were, they would take us out, and as kids, going to, always every weekend we'd go somewhere, and family is certainly important to my dad, which I guess has rubbed off on me. But certainly in my teenage years, I felt a bit more distant from him. And then up into my 20s, I loved my dad, but I could never tell him that I loved him.
Mm.
It felt weird to say it, and we just didn't have that relationship. But then his younger brother, my uncle, passed away. I think I was 25, 26 years old, something like that. And he passed away, and I went over. They lived in Canada, and I went over for the funeral and really to support my dad. And I looked at my cousins and realized they're never going to be able to tell their dad that they love them, that they love him. And so that really changed things for me. I really saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as a kind of message from the universe that, look, you don't know how long he's going to be around for. You've only got one dad. And so that kind of started off a bit of a journey to improve my relationship with him, which we have. We've got a really great relationship now, and it's given me a different viewpoint, looking back at how he was with us, and he was always doing the best. And he could have been he sometimes really lax, and in other ways he's very, very much a disciplinarian, and I didn't used to like that. But again, now I see he was just trying to do things to help me. And his dad passed away, I think. So my grandfather passed away when he was 57, and I remember when my dad hit 57, that whole year I was just thinking he might die. And which was crazy, but it certainly made me appreciate him more. And now that I'm a dad, again, it gives me a different appreciation for him and what he did. So it's kind of been topsy turvy a little bit, going from all kids love their dads, and I remember when I was younger wanting to be like him, and then going through a phase of not being very close and probably resenting him for a little bit, and then now coming back full circle, really. So I keep that in mind with my son, and try and cherish the moments I have with him as much as I can, although it can be easier said than done. And already, even though he's very young, I know I don't own him. I'm here to guide him, and at a certain point, he's going to go off and be his own man and do his own thing, and maybe that includes having a family. And so, that I will probably have moments with him at some point where I'm going to fall out with him, and he'll fall out with me. But to try and not take that too seriously, and just come back and enjoy each other.
Yeah, that's great. I really can resonate with what you're saying there. Just picking up on one thing you were saying about your dad, and kind of going on a journey where you kind of recalibrated, I suppose you could call it, your relationship with him. What did you do there? Was there a kind of a conscious process you went through to kind of rebuild that relationship?
Yeah, like the first few years was more of a conscious process. I'd say the first kind of 4 or 5 years after my uncle passed away was just trying a lot harder, and making it a priority to have a good relationship with him. Like I said, I just told myself I don't know how much longer I'm going to have him in my life, and I knew that if I didn't tell him I loved him, I'd regret it. And so it was just kind of working through that, and developing that relationship, and really making an effort. And then when I started doing my coach training, and learning a little bit more about how the mind works, and learning more about my psychology and universal psychology, I guess, that had a huge impact. It had a huge impact because I learned to not take my thinking so seriously, and that included my thinking around him. And I know I dropped a lot of anger and a lot of resentment, in general in my life when I went through that process. So when I started to train to be a coach, what I didn't expect was just how much of an impact it had on me. And I know some people say that people get into coaching when they really need coaching themselves, and I think there's an element of that. But I kind of felt that didn't apply to me because I'd already done so much personal development, 10, 11, 12 years before I became a coach. And I wasn't looking for personal development. I was really happy But that was a surprise when I did start to train to be a coach. I was like, wow, all that was just getting me to the starting line.
Hmm.
And so everything that I've done as a coach, has improved, or a lot of what I've done as a coach has improved my relationships, all of my relationships, including those with both my parents. And I'm sure that's gonna continue. You never get to the end point of that, and something I tell other coaches is I find in this profession that personal development is professional development. If you're going to be a life coach, um, there's a really strong element of walking your talk. And so in the impact of the work that you do, and I certainly find that the more I and my path is slightly different to what I was doing in my 20s, but the more I follow my path now and see more for myself and grow and I like the term drop my misunderstandings around life and around people. The more I do that, the more not only does it affect me personally as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a friend, but it also affects me professionally, which I love. I think it's great. It's kind of a double whammy that, part of my job is to carry on my own personal journey as well.
That's such a powerful message, I think, because certainly I can recognise it in my own journey as well. That it's an essential, isn't it, for a coach to be on that journey of self-discovery and self-development, for them to have more impact on their clients. And if that stops, then I think it'd be very incongruent. Just another question about your relationship with your dad, Ankush. How do you? I mean, what's been unfolding in terms of him as a grandparent? Is he involved with your son in his life so far?
Yeah, we live quite far away from my parents. I think we're about 3 hours away at the moment. So we don't get to spend as much time with them as we'd like. But yeah, I'm sure your listeners can relate to this if they've got kids and they've got parents who are alive as well. That grandparents tend to be very different than they were as parents.
Mm.
And he's kind of besotted with my son. And I've seen a real. But you know what? To be fair, just as much as I've changed over the last 20 years or so and grown as a person, my dad's been on his own journey, and I don't know if some of that is down to me, some of it's just down to himself. Some people may know I used to do a podcast myself on relationships, and my dad listened to every single episode multiple times, which I was really surprised about because he's not really into that. He's not really into personal development. I'd buy him books when I was into personal development. He never read them, and yet when I created this show about relationships, he would really listen to every episode, and he would tell me that it really helped him. And so, partly is that, it's not only that, but partly is just life, partly is just getting older. But he's certainly changed a huge amount since I was a teenager as a person in his own right. And so that obviously carries on and affects his relationship with my son, which I hope they'll develop and we'll get stronger.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a beautiful point you're making about how everybody is in movement, and not just ourselves, and the dynamics which can be difficult between ourselves and a parent can also have the opportunity to mature and evolve over time. They don't stay still. They don't have to stay still. They do for some people. Just switching tack a little bit. You're I think you're the dad with the youngest son I've had on the podcast so far in the episodes I've recorded. So 3 months. And what I've been exploring with other dads is, particularly in relation to their businesses, how we've been using the word balance, but balance often hasn't been the right word. But I'm going to use it for now just to explain the question, really, how they find balance between their attention on their business and their attention on their child and their family. What have you been seeing in these first 3 months about how that's playing out for you?
You know what? It's funny, and so many people have been telling me that, oh, my son's so lucky, because his dad's a coach, and um, I've made a point when people have asked me how's it going to be real about it, and I'm still a human being, and there've been some really tough moments, and the first, not that there's anything wrong with him, and touch wood, we were very lucky that he was born happy and healthy, and he's a really good kid, really good, and people who've seen him have said, um, you know, he's a very contented little boy. We know some parents who've had kids at the same time who, aren't so fortunate. So we're extremely lucky that way. And there've been some really frustrating times for me, where you're just tired and trying to balance everything, as I'm sure everyone who's got kids can relate to. And so, you know, I've been telling people it's been really, really rewarding, and it's been really, really difficult. And I think, what's been helpful to me has been the ability to reset. I think that's been my biggest um, help that I've had from the work that I do professionally, is that no matter what happens, no matter how tough things get with him, no matter how tough things get with my wife, because that's been a challenge for my wife and I to deal with each other when we don't have the time and space to just chat away at the evening and catch up, and we're well rested and all the rest of it. So it's been, to be able to have those low moments, and um and then be able to reset and not take things personally, through understanding that my feelings aren't a reflection of how hard parenting is, or how difficult my partner is, or how good or bad my kid is, or how good or bad I am as a father. um, you know we feel what we feel in the moment, and it passes. And again, that's something we can learn from our children, especially when they're very young, that they might feel whatever they feel, they express it, they don't hold on to it, and then it's gone. And so for me, realizing that in the same way, if I feel angry, I can feel angry. If I feel sad, I feel sad. If I feel upset, I feel upset. If I feel happy, I feel happy. And not trying to manage that emotional state is really helpful, because often, you sleep on things, and they're a lot better. Sometimes you don't even need to sleep on things, and they're a lot better. And that's certainly been the case for me. So
I really
I'm sure if you asked me the question again, I'd answer it differently. There's so many things that I've learned in the first few months.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you being real about it, and that's very much my hope for this podcast, is that we have dads coming on who are just real about what it is to parent, and some of the ups and downs. I don't know if you're willing to share a bit more about what kind of the challenging sides have been for you. You've talked about sort of frustration and tiredness, and not being able to connect with your wife so much if time is shorter. But are there any other sort of themes that have emerged for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That I mean, there's been a lot. There's been a lot. I've felt. I've certainly the tiredness has kicked in. I used to love my, working for myself. One of the perks of that has not been having to get up ridiculously early. Although I still was getting up pretty early before he was born. I liked getting up early in the morning, but I had a really nice leisurely start to the day. I had a good routine, going to the gym, um, you know, um, doing stretches and stuff, and eat my breakfast over, reading. I had a really good routine, and I wouldn't start working until about 9:30, 10 in the morning. Now I work hard, um, but I used to start the day doing stuff that I couldn't do when I worked in a corporate job, and have a bit more time to do that. and I'd walk my wife to the train station when she'd go to work, and we'd have time together. It was a really nice routine. And then baby comes along, and you know, broken sleep. Um, when I go to the gym, I actually, the first few weeks, went to the gym regularly because I didn't want to break the routine. I thought if I stop now, that's it. I'm out for like a year or two.
Mhm.
And so I went, but that caused arguments with my wife because she felt like I wasn't suffering along with her.
Right.
And that was a challenge, you know, um, to not take things personally because she was tired. You know, she was tired. She'd just given birth. She's got this little human that is wanting all of her attention, and it you know, there was a lot of challenge there for me personally. Um, you know, and you know, I mean that I mean the other thing really was I which I found was I work from home, so I couldn't get away from, you
Mhm.
know, from them, and that might sound harsh, but you know, as he's got a little bit older and she's my wife takes him out and they have their little activities, just having a few hours to myself during the day
Yeah.
is really, really great.
Mhm.
And again, the first few weeks, it's like, you know, anytime he cries, if he's kicking off, I'd rush out to see if he's okay. And it was coming from the best place. Like, is my wife okay? Does she need a hand? Is he okay? But it was very distracting. So it was trying to balance my systems and structure and routine, which got thrown out the window, alongside my tiredness, alongside my wife's tiredness, alongside no one gives you a manual on how to look after and baby, and everyone's got different opinions. You know,
Yeah.
everyone's got different opinions, and they don't shy from telling you what their opinions are.
Yeah. So true.
Um, so I mean, it's nothing that most of the you know, dads haven't been through. I mean, maybe me working from home is a little bit unique, but again, there's benefits of it. I know some dads who are away really struggled being away from their child and go, I wish I was at home. So you know, it's just life. Um, it's just life. So you know, I don't want to turn around and go, well, there was this one moment where blah blah. You know, you get the usual stuff. You get the being peed on. You get the being puked on. You know, luckily I haven't been pooed on yet, though my wife had that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I've got really overprotective. Actually, that was one bit. You know, where, you know, maybe certain family members wanted us to do something, and I just got, oh, and I look back now, I was overly protective, and didn't really think clearly. But I mean, these are all just, it's just, again, like, it's just life. It's just situations, and there might be situations that I deal with badly that someone else would be totally fine, and situations that I deal with well that someone else would deal badly with. But everyone's got their own unique flavor of that, and we deal with it. And you know, to anyone, I'd say just go and hang out with a bunch of your mates, and if people really open up, you know, everyone's got mates who act in certain ways in certain areas of their life that we would think, why do you do that for, right? So but it makes sense to everyone, and in the same
Mhm.
way certain things make sense to us, but we
Yeah.
work through it. And one thing that I found is that it can either be something to torment myself with, um, or it can be an opportunity to learn. And certainly I try and do that. So, you know, where my wife and I have maybe argued or whatever, like at one point we got into this really bad routine of just switching the TV on, you know, at the end of the day, like just when he's
Mm.
sleeping and just knackered. And then, you know, I just said to her the other day, like, maybe we'll just switch off half an hour earlier and just have some time for me and you, and just get into bed earlier and just talk or whatever. And again, it's just an opportunity to reset, an opportunity to just come back, um, to a bit of a clear head, and work out a way forward. And I think, you know, there's a saying that, you know, back in the day, and a ridiculous saying, which was, people say, well, if you want to fix a relationship, have a kid. And you know, having had a child, I can see it work both ways. You know,
Yeah.
I could see
Yeah.
a child rip a couple apart, and really expose, you know, the cracks in the relationship and the cracks in themselves, where they were, you know, unable or unwilling to see things differently. but also I think a child can bring people together. You know, in many ways, I feel closer to my wife now than I've ever done before. I mean, we kind of said it half jokingly, half serious, but there's no way we can get away from each other, you know, right? Even if we were to get divorced, we'd be in each other's lives
Yeah,
forever
yeah,
because of him.
mm.
And so it has been an opportunity to bring us closer together. Um, but uh, but then that's life, isn't it? You can approach anything that way.
So a lot of wisdom in that, and a lot of realness, which I really
Mm,
appreciate, Ankush. You touched on something that's kind of another theme I've been exploring with dads, which is around your sense of personal freedom and how that works within a relationship, and particularly when you have a child. And I think, you know, you're talking about your. I was kind of reminiscing blissfully as you're talking about your morning routine. Those days that I used to also have that kind of start to the day, which is very different now. And you know, there's some enormous rewards in the time I get in the mornings hanging out with my boy, and I know it won't be forever, so I'm kind of trying to cherish um, the time that I have with him. But there's also days when I think I just want to, you know, I'd love to just get out and do my own thing for a bit,
mm,
and not have this. And
mm,
yeah, just wondering how that's kind of evolving for you, that sort of adjustment into your, maybe what you understood as your space
mm.
and freedom within your life.
Yeah, I was talking to my sister about this, and she was reading a book about parenting in France. And what she was recommending the book to me, and I've got such a long reading list. I was like, if you read it, give me the gist of it. And she said the gist of the book was that in France, um, people don't put kids on a pedestal, in terms of the kids don't take priority culturally.
Mm,
And so this is kind of third hand now because I haven't read the book, but I think it was from someone who, you know, was British and then moved to France, or,
mm,
or the other way around, something like that. And she said, you know, they found that French kids um, are much more well behaved than British kids. Um, and I don't know if this is scientific, but it might be an observational thing. But just how important it is for parents to have their own lives. And so I think just like it is for me, I appreciate actually it's the same for my wife. And you know, it's much harder for her than it has been for me. Um, but I think it's just it's a human thing, and my wife and I were very open about this when we got married. That when we got together, that we didn't want to lose our sense of personal identity as well. So, you know, I have gone away every year, almost every year, for a long 13, 14 years, I think now, um, on a boys' holiday, with some of my friends from university. And last year I went as well, 2 months before he was born.
mm,
There was a bit of negotiation there, but it was a priority for me, and it's a priority for me this year as well to do that, because you know that's important to me, and I think it's important to maintain those relationships and those friendships that I have, and to have my time and get away. Um, well, I think that's really important.
mm.
And to me, for my wife, I mean, I think we were married for about a year, and she went on holiday without me for 2 weeks. And I don't know if that's unusual for other people, but I know certainly amongst my friendship circle, it's quite unusual. You know, but it just didn't make sense for me business wise to take 2 weeks off work. I wasn't that bothered about going on holiday. She really wanted to go. In the end, her mom and dad went with her as well, and they had a great time. And I thought it's fantastic. You know, in fact, just before my son, well, before my wife got pregnant, she went on holiday with her sister, and we were just talking about it this morning. And she went skiing, and again, she went without me. You know, and her sister and her, they had a great time, and she really appreciated that. So I think it's just it's a human thing to really want that, and I think it's really healthy, right? And I think it's useful for um, my son to have parents who are healthy, mentally healthy, and as stress free as possible.
Mhm.
And so I think if if we can have, a bit of our time, which you can, with a bit of planning and prep and whatever, and thinking about these things, then it's certainly doable. And there's the element of realizing a holiday is not going to make you feel better, because we've all been on holidays where we've looked forward to the holiday, look forward to the holiday, look forward to the holiday, and then you get on holiday and you just get stressed about coming back off holiday, and it's never enough. So there's a balance to everything, for sure. And understanding that whatever we feel is shifting and changing, and is not a fixed thing, and is a reflection of how we're thinking about the circumstance of the person, or the situation, is really helpful. But that doesn't mean we need to put our kids on a pedestal and 100% all the time. I think it's really important for us, and there's the analogy, and on the airplane, before fitting your kids' mask, fit yourself.
Yeah.
Your own mask first. And I think that's true in a relationship, in a marriage, as a parent. I think it's true as a friend.
A good maxim for life. Yeah.
Across the board. I tend to think women have more of an issue with this, from what I found with my clients. As a generalization, they tend to put other people before themselves. They tend to sacrifice their mental health, well-being, physical health, for their family, for other people. But then I think they secretly resent them. But I think dads certainly can do that too. But I think it's important for us to know that, if you're not operating well, then you're less useful as a father, than if you're okay, not perfect, but if you're operating a little bit more rested. Little things like, when my wife and I, when he was first born, I would do the last feed of the day, and my wife would stay awake with me, and she would do her own thing, and then she was really tired, and then I just said, look, why don't we just get into bed earlier, and I'll get up, feed him. So my wife and I get into bed for 9, half 9, which is very early. We never used to do that before. But it means that she gets a bit more sleep and she's rested. And I know when she's rested, that makes my life easier, right? And it makes, and she's better able to handle him. So it's kind of just a little bit of common sense there. And of course, that doesn't mean turn into an absentee father, go out and get drunk all the time. And there's a common sense to this, but it's I think everybody really knows in their heart, what could be useful for them, and what they need, and just applying some kind of sensible common sense to that will go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one thing I wanted to pick up on, I mean, you've been sharing how, you have this understanding about what our feelings are telling us, and how our psychology works, which is maybe different from what many traditional paradigms of psychology would suggest. But I've been exploring with dads, their relationship with guilt and anger, because that kind of comes up quite often in the conversation. And people who come from the 3 Principles community that we're both in have a slightly different take on this. But I've been quite open in these podcasts, saying that although I've seen a lot in that direction, there are times when I still feel really kind of caught in moments of anger and guilt in relation to being a dad. And I just wondered how that's playing out for you, Ankush.
Oh yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm human, and with the work that you and I do, and this understanding of what's called the 3 Principles, I think one of the misunderstandings people have about this work is that when you understand how the mind works, you'll never get upset or angry or guilty, or the level to which you do demonstrates the level to which you understand the 3 Principles. And I think that's a huge misunderstanding. We feel what we feel in the moment, and if we could choose how we thought, we'd all choose lovely, positive, uplifting, happy thoughts most of the time. and we wouldn't be choosing angry, anxious, insecure thinking. So it's not personal, as far as I'm concerned. And I've had those moments. I've had moments of guilt. I've had moments of anger. I've had moments of upset. That's okay, and that I know enough to not act and make any big decisions. When I'm in those 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 states of mind, but I don't need to do anything about them. That's part of the problem. And when I work with my clients, and I work with a lot of men, one of the things I point them to is, what would happen if they stopped judging their own thinking and judging their own feelings, and stop trying to do it. And the question I often get from people is, well, what do I do about this? So you're telling me about how the mind works. Now what do I do? What do I do? And we're so stuck in a doing. We're so used to okay, what's the strategy? What's the technique? Do I have to meditate? Do I have to? And we've never tried out not doing. We're so used to doing that we've never just let ourselves feel what we felt and kind of just witness it as much as we can. And if we get caught out completely, we get caught out, but not judge it, not judge ourselves, just let it be, and observe it, and let it pass on its own. Most people haven't done that, but when they try, they give themselves a bit of their own power back, because they're not up in their heads trying to manage their thinking, trying to manage their feelings, which is, it's trying to control the ocean currents or something. It's just not possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can put up in that metaphor, you can put up a little wall to protect a part of the coastline, right, from waves. Yes, you can do that. You can think certain things, but you can't manage the entire waves in the ocean. It's just not possible, and we can't manage our thinking. And so there's less to do than people realize. And so what I know is, for the rest of my life as a father, I'm going to have these moments of anger, upset, guilt, and that's okay. And when I do have those moments now, I don't tend to dwell in them for so long. And as I've spoken about earlier on, about I'm able to reset quicker and quicker. And sometimes not. That's actually not true. In general, I'm able to reset quicker, but sometimes I'm not, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
But I'm doing the best that I can, and I run these immersion events for men. We spend like 6 days going in deep on these retreats. And one of the things that I've seen come up, and I've been doing these for 5 years, and I do them twice a year, and the thing that I see again and again and again with men I've had men come from Canada to Australia, Germany to Slovakia, I mean all over the place, different ages. The youngest guy is 17 and the oldest one was in his 50s, right? And across the board, different cultures, different ages, men are so hard on themselves, right? And again, this isn't about, I don't tend to attract people who are looking for therapy or want to hold hands and sing kumbaya. That's not the kind of retreat it is. It's very practical, and yet I see it time and again. Men are really hard on themselves. They're very judgmental of themselves, and they don't talk about it. And so, my understanding of how the mind works has been helpful for me to drop my own judgment of myself, because I'm doing the best that I can, right? And so is everyone else. And especially when it comes to being a father, there are probably better fathers than me out there. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure there's worse fathers than me out there. And judging myself and being hard on myself doesn't help me to become a better father, right? If anything, it leads me to wallow in self-pity, which makes me less useful as a father.
There's so much wisdom in that kind of last segment of what you shared, and I think people will get a massive amount of value out of what you've just been saying there, Ankush. It really resonated with me. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you for all you've shared. Where can people find out a bit more about you?
The best way to get hold of me at the moment is my website, which is ankushjain.co.uk, and I'll spell that for you: ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk. And there's little icons at the top, so you can connect to me on Facebook, Twitter, all the usual things. But if you want to get hold of me, just use the contact me page on the website.
Brilliant, and I'll include the links in the show notes as well. It's been wonderful having you on the show, and thank you for sharing all your insights on this, the early part of your journey to fatherhood. And it was great also hearing your story from before fatherhood as well, because I learned some new things about you, and there was so many riches in that. So thanks again, Ankush.
You're most welcome, Matt. Thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome.